So welcome to week 5 of INA 4300 here at Angelo State, Advanced Problems in National Security. So the midterm, you all should have it to me. I will have that graded back to you by this time next week. And for only one person asked for an extension. So other than that, I think everybody should have it to me. And yeah, I'll get it back to you so you can have an idea of where to go forward for the final paper. So last week, TSA was the big discussion points. I can talk about this intimately because I used to do red teaming for TSA. And I can talk about red teaming in a separate lecture, but I wanted to just hit the high points from this discussion. So I want just two issues I want to talk about before we talk about TSA. If no one here is old enough, but prior to 9/11, and one person talked about private security guards, but you didn't have a TSA. You had private security guards at these airports at the lowest bidder, minimum wage. They weren't involved in any kind of cogent security plan, and it was a threat. And let's face it, prior to 9/11, even now, you would pay for the cheaper flight to get from New York to Los Angeles or wherever you're going, and you could cut corners on security. So that was an issue. In the 1970s, I know no one here is old enough to remember this, but you had hijackings on a weekly basis from 1968 to about 1973, 1974. This is before there were medical detectors or any security on aircraft. It was truly the Wild West of security, and anyone could. We had Middle East terrorists, we had Cuban terrorists, we had communist hijackers. Anyone could just take a flight and hijack it, and then get hostages or get whatever political concessions. So when we argue about abolishing TSA, we just have to remember that this was kind of the state prior to the establishment of a TSA. And then again, we always criticize the TSA. One of the things that is important to remember is the TSA and IRS, because they get a lot of criticism, are the only two agencies that, one, have a regulatory effect, but two, impact Americans on not quite a day-to-day basis, but on a regular basis. The average American, these are the only two federal agencies they'll interact with. And they criticize IRS and TSA all the time, when in fact it's the lawmakers that you elect that make the laws that TSA and IRS have to abide by and have to implement. So, we criticize them all they want, but they're really coming from lawmakers that the people elect. So, what I'd also just say, what would improve TSA and on those red teams, the reason that they were so poor was that you had a one-size-fits-all approach. I challenge you next time to travel is to don't walk behind him, but look at a guy who has to x-ray all those bags, and he's looking at them for maybe 1 second before it goes through. If you treat all 400 passengers and their baggage the same, then you're going to have a problem. So the best is kind of a risk-based security problem. And we have information where you classify people coming through the gate. And we know you things about you based on your purchase history, your travel history, if you purchase close to the flight, whether you purchase in cash or not. We know that you're a higher risk based on those factors. And we could provide a little bit more scrutiny to that higher risk population than we do to providing scrutiny to everyone. Everyone goes through the body scanner, or everyone gets their bags checked at the same time. If we had that kind of risk-based analysis, that would be far better than the one-size-fits-all approach that, one, is cumbersome to the traveling public, but also is not as effective. So then you'd assign a risk score, and they would get the higher level. So that's just kind of a better way to look at it, kind of an answer to this week's or last week's discussion. So this week we're going to look at the DHS components, and the question is, the big question is DHS versus the Terrorist Integration Center, which is a better place to house the problem of watch listing. And I call watch listing the biggest problem in national security or in counterterrorism. I compare it to, they always say the hardest thing in sports is to hit a baseball. Well, the hardest thing in counterterrorism is watch listing, and make sure that certain watch lists get to the right people so people can be stopped for immigration or stopped at certain levels where they wouldn't present a risk to the United States. And that process of watch listing, again, cross-checking watch lists against visa entrants and passenger manifests coming in, where should that house? Where would it be most effective? And then as we're thinking through that, whether that problem or the other components of DHS, border security, or CBP, FEMA, and others, are they adequate to deal with the current threat, the lone wolves, right? Very easy, I wouldn't say very easy, but it's easier to deal with foreign-based threats and people coming in that aren't U.S. citizens that have to come here. Well, that's really not the problem anymore. It's not the mass 9/11-like case. It's the guy who's radicalized here in our country, the guy who's a U.S. citizen, the guy who reads internet traffic, whether it's Islamic or right-wing. That's the problem. And how do we deal with that? And I'll allow you to talk about that in your discussion as well. What do you think would be the best way to deal with someone, again, who's not coming into our country because they're not foreign terrorists, or they radicalize through the internet, not in a massive group? So that's this week. If there's any questions or issues, let me know.